Hereby call the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors workshop meeting to order. Welcome everyone that's in attendance. It's good to see everyone out after this freeze that we've had. Hopefully everybody's power has resumed. We're going to go ahead and get started, if you will. We'll have our Pledge of Allegiance, and then immediately following our Pledge of Allegiance, we'll have our invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let us pray. Our most gracious and heavenly Father, hallowed be thy name. We thank you for the precious gift of life. We thank you that we live in this community. We thank you for the citizens of our community. We thank you for the workers of the public safety departments and what they do and what they endure. Bless them, O Lord, in the only ways that you can do. And we ask that you be with us throughout this meeting. The things that we say and do will be in development for this community. I ask this in his name. Amen. Ms. Adams.
Yes, sir.
You going to kick us off here on the workshop?
Yes, sir. Would you like to approve the agenda or wait till
No, let's go ahead and do it now. I'm sorry. Okay, the setting of agendas, anyone have any items to be added to?
I have two items. The first one is the Mayor Pamphlet, Sarah Hamlet Blackwell will be appearing tonight to ask permission from the Board of Supervisors to sign off on the grant application for the town.
All right, let's make it 6A.
And then the second request is a letter from the school board. The attorney is prepared to speak to it. It's, the county has a PPEA. The school board last year under the PPEA accepted a proposal, and this is just authorizing them to continue those discussions.
Okay.
It has to come to approval.
All right, so that'd be 6B. Now, you have a 6C, don't you? Local law enforcement.
Oh, you're going to discuss that tonight?
Yeah.
Okay, because I indicated that it may not be discussed tonight.
Uh-oh.
So, the sheriff is participating over the telephone, but he's not appearing in person.
Okay.
That would be the request, the email request that you received today concerning the generator.
Okay, we'll make it 6C. Any other items? Okay. Ms. Adams, you up. Work session.
Would you like a motion to approve the amended?
She's taking your lines out. You
I heard
believe
most
that?
of it. Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the amended agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Hinkle. Is that second?
I'll second.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Okay. During the work session period of the board meeting, we have Patricia Morton, who's the registrar, and Frank.
Welcome. You are the only participant in the conference.
Please state your name and all for the record and address.
I'm Frank Pointer, Chairman of the Appomattox County Local Board, 4893 Stonewall Road. I'm got a budget that I think probably you saw, it kind of took your breath away. Did mine too. You got to remember that we only do what the legislators put in act what to do, and they keep changing it, keep going up every year. So we'll let Patricia explain, and if you got any questions afterwards, which I'm sure you will, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Patricia Morton, as I think you all know, and we're here to discuss the combined budgets because I find it much easier to look at it rolled up as opposed to individually, because there's so many things that tie into one another. So We're going to go through this. Are you understanding me okay with the mask? Okay, great. All right, so there's 3 areas that we need to look at. The first is increased election equipment expenses. The second is additional support to support the early voting and the voting by mail. And then third is physically accommodating the early voting. We have a lot of limitations that we'll talk about in the General Registrar's office, in my office. I'm curious, did any of you vote early this time? Meaning that not at your precinct, but in my office? Did anybody come down and do that? A couple of people. Yeah, okay. Well, as you'll see, it was quite popular. So we'll get there. The first thing is the mandatory increases, mandatory requirements from the state that are unfortunately going to cost the county a fair amount. The first one is the 25 voting machines annual maintenance. It was originally in our contract, but that was for 4 years, and that contract is now, the 4 years are up. I just found out today from Print-Elect that the price of that is going to be the same as last year, which is what I had plugged into the budget, which is the $5,350 for 25 machines. So that's annual, maintenance on the machines, making sure they're working correctly, et cetera. In addition to that, this year, the state has mandated recertification of our voting machines. And unfortunately, this means upgrading. Some of the DS200s need a firmware upgrade. The express votes, which are the disabled voting machines where someone can do it by audio or large print, those are unfortunately requiring a hardware upgrade. And that's because the state had made a deal when they certified Print-Elect before where they could run Windows 7, but now they have changed their mind in the state at Elect, and they've said you got to run Windows 10. So somehow I think they believe this is a security issue. I'm not really sure why, because these are not ever on the internet. But in any case, that is estimated, and it is only an estimate for all the 25 machines to come in at 13,000. They have not yet been able to give us a figure on this. So we put that in as a placeholder based on talking with Print-Elect and with other general registrars. And feel free to interrupt me if you have questions as we go along. That may work out better for you.
Let me stop you right there.
Yes.
So you said we're going to have to upgrade our 25 machines?
That's correct.
So if we have to upgrade them, will we need to pay that $5,300
Yes.
maintenance? If it's a new product, why would we be paying maintenance?
It's not really a new
This
product,
year.
but it's, they have to go through and test them every time, and that's what the maintenance is about. I don't know if you can explain that
Yeah,
better, but
maintenance is a separate thing. If there's anything wrong, like rollers are bad or batteries, they'll replace that stuff. But this is a Department of Election mandate, the upgrade. It's a whole different, it comes at a different time.
Okay, I
They
just,
haven't even
I'm-
given us a date for.
I just want to make sure I'm on the same page.
Right,
Because usually
right.
you buy a new product, maintenance comes with it for at least a year.
Well, it's not a new product, they're just upgrading the older.
So we're not buying new machines.
we're not, no, not at all. No, you'd be seeing a much larger bill for that.
Oh, yeah, it would be over $100,000
Okay.
we're buying a new machine.
Thank you.
Yes. Yep, no problem. Okay, I wanted to give you a little background on what we saw for 2020. As you know, it was a high turnout election. We had the highest turnout out of the last 4, counting this one, presidential elections. We used our CARES Act money that I talked to you about in September. We used over half of it, 56% of it went towards staffing, both at the precincts, in my office prior to election, and on election day, and wrapping up as well, because there's always a lot of work to do after the election. We had assistance from 93 officers of election. This is much higher than normal. And we had 3 temporary assistant registrars. And the difference is an assistant registrar can get into Veris, this software, and actually help with the early voting by logging somebody in and checking them in as having voted, that sort of thing. So as of last November, at the time of the election, we had 11,704 registered voters, and we're currently up. We're now at 11,780. This chart is a very graphic picture on the bottom here of what actually happened in terms of early voting. So, as you know, the no excuse law went into effect July 1st of last year. And what that means is that anybody who wants to can come into my office and vote early. Anybody who wants to can vote by mail. So you now have 3 ways to vote. And that top green line there is the number of people that voted, the percent of people who voted at their precinct in the past. It was always pretty steady and pretty high. And the reason for that was that most of us couldn't go vote any other way. But now people have a choice. And so the second line there in red is the people who early voted, and you can see how it shoots up for this year at the end there. It was extremely popular, the early voting, and I expect that to continue. And then the gold line at the bottom is the voting by mail. That went up some, but not nearly as much. This being Appomattox, people love putting their ballot into the machine. They love interacting with their neighbors, but they were happy to do it at my office as well as at the precinct. So we voted, 50% of our voters who voted prior to Election Day. This is enormous. This is a huge change because the early voting season goes on for 45 days now. It's no longer Election Day. It's, as Frank calls it, election season. In the past, we could only saw 4 to 8% of the people that Sabrina had in her office, and now we're seeing much higher numbers than that. So additional help was absolutely crucial to helping over 4,600 of our voters.
Question on that.
Yes.
The early voting in your office.
Mm-hmm.
Now, did you increase your employees?
Not permanently, no. I did it all with more temporary assistance. So you remember when we talked in November, we had CARES money? That CARES money was absolutely crucial to the success of this last election. So I used our Officer of Election pool because they were all knowledgeable in how the voting process works. And they helped the voters out in the front office to, take down their name. And you don't have to fill out an application anymore like you used to have to. But we'd get so backed up at times that they would take down their name and their address, stuff like that. Help them with the machine, help them if they had questions, the normal stuff that officers of election do. And then I had a lot more time for my staff, my 2 assistants, as well as 3 volunteer assistant registrars, 2 of whom were interacting with the public and 1 of whom was helping with the vote by mail in the background. So I just figured it out today, I had 800 hours of extra help to make that election succeed. It was big. And that's why you'll see I'm looking for some funds to make the next November election succeed as well. So supporting vote by mail. Because anybody can do it now, more people wanted it. So we processed over 1,100 applications, and we mailed out over 1,000 ballots, a few by email, but most of them by snail mail. Our assistants, as I was telling you, the officers of election and my assistants helped out, and we got over 600 ballots out on that very first day, which was September 18th. I called it opening day. That's how I think of it. So once the voting starts, the law requires with vote by mail that we process that application and get that ballot out in the mail within 3 business days. So we are legally obligated to process things very quickly. And that puts pressure on us because we have no idea how many applications we're going to get in a certain day. So there are 14 steps needed to process voting by mail. I'm not going to bore you with them, but if you want to hear them, I'd love to go through them. So we estimate that voting by mail takes 3 to 4 times the personnel power that handling a voter, helping a voter in either my office or at the precinct takes. It's a very intensive process. The states that do entirely vote by mail pretty much outsource it, and they've got an entirely different process than what we do. But for us, it's a pretty labor-intensive process. So. And then you probably remember hearing last year about the absentee cure process. What that is anybody who sends in their ballot and does not fill out the envelope correctly, what's called the ballot return envelope or the oath envelope, which happens fairly often, we now are required to contact that person in as many ways as we can until we try to get hold of them, hopefully, and give them the opportunity to either get a new ballot, so we spoil their first one, and help them vote a second one, or they can come into the office and if they forgot to sign the application, they can sign the application, they can fix it. So that's the cure. And I was very happy to see that we were able to cure 90% of the ballots this way. We're not talking hundreds here. We're talking a couple dozen that needed curing. And we just had a process going, and we have to track it legally and all this stuff, and it worked quite well. So it's a very good change for the voter, but again, it's quite labor-intensive for us.
I have another question on it.
Sure.
That begs the question, actually. Do you do a pre-certification prior to sending out the mail ballots?
What do you mean by pre-certification?
Is John Doe John Doe?
So if John Doe is a registered voter and John Doe has correctly completed his application, they have to fill out an application for vote by mail. And it needs to have at least their birth year and the last four of their social security, their name, their address, their mailing address if different, has to be signed, has to be all of this stuff. So we check that. That's about the only pre-checking that we do. But it's fairly normal. It's the same kind of checking you would get when you go to the polls and somebody looks up that, yes, Sammy Carter can vote in this precinct. So, yeah. Okay, in the end, 23% of the people that we sent ballots out to did not choose to vote them, which again is adding to our workload. Some of them, many of them, brought them back and said, I changed my mind. I don't want to vote by mail. I want to do it in your office or do it at the precinct, which is fine. It's just causing extra work. Some of them showed up at the precinct and did not bring their ballot back. They had to vote provisionally, legally. And those who could not explain to the electoral board that why they didn't bring their ballot back and have a good reason. For example, some did get lost in the mail, that happens. Their votes did not count. And we had 24 provisional voters this time, and just under half of them counted. So it definitely is changing, and I'm hoping it gets people to think in the future that if you're going to ask for a vote, a mailed ballot, that you please choose to use it. You know, we have no control over that, but that's where we're hoping it goes. Okay, I wanted to talk next about the people who came into the office. So this is a chart that shows how many people per day came and voted in my tiny little front office. There were 3,850 total voters. We were thanked, as I think I mentioned, many, many times for doing this. And it always made me smile because it was the law. I didn't have a choice, but, you know, people thought we were great. We had some voters who complained of having to wait outside because if you're familiar with my office, there's no good place to wait. There's no hallway or anything. It clearly caught on. As you can see, the number of voters really shot up towards the last week and a half of the voting season. So, Ace, did you say there's a pointer here?
There is actually that little sun icon on it.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure how well it'll show up on the TV.
That's true. Well, anyway, it's a little hard to aim here. Okay, so it doesn't really show up on the screen. But anyway, you can see how it went up. Our peak was 310 voters just before the election on that Friday. And I at that point had 5 officers of election helping to try to manage this, volume of people and the flow. And Mary Cush, who's one of our wonderful officers of election down in Pamplin, she said, I feel like I'm doing a dance here because we were literally tripping over each other in that front office. It is very tiny, as you'll see. So throughout this process, we had 23 of our officers of election. I would just schedule them for 3-4 hours as needed. And we sometimes had people on call that we'd call and say, it's really crazy today, we need another person, that kind of thing. So we kept them moving through as best we could. However, it's not as safe as we would have liked because of the distancing, the spacing in there is quite tiny. I wanted to point out that we had 3 wonderful volunteers, but as Chuck Haney on our board has said, we can't count on that free assistance in the next year. We may get it, we may not. We'll see. So,
Can you help me just for a second?
Yes.
Because my eyes aren't as good as they used to be.
Yep.
What are those numbers on the side where can you just tell me what that figure is For
On the graph?
The average number of voters coming in, yeah.
Oh, okay. So the average is kind of hard to ascertain. The number range runs from 100 at the start there and dips down. I think our lowest was 51, and it went up to 310 for the high. So that's, the range pretty much tends to be about, I think 75 was the average when I computed it or so.
Thank you.
Now, the safety factor is questioned, was questioned.
I'm sorry?
The safety factor was questioned.
Was questioned?
Uh-huh.
Oh, yes, yes,
Due to COVID or?
yes.
Yeah, and we not able to always keep separation.
Definitely not able to keep separation. And I'll show you a picture of my office, not full of voters. I neglected to take some full of voters. I should have. But I was busy helping them. Okay, so in terms of the second item relative to the first three on the budget that we were talking about, the three items, the above normal expenses that I spent last fall that the CARES Act paid for was almost $7,000 in extra time for officers of election and my assistant registrars. We had almost $1,800 in volunteer time, coming up to just under $9,000 for that chunk. So that's time from existing employees that's above and beyond normal. Normal election, normal office time for my staff. For the request for this coming year, I've cut that down and I'm requesting $6,000 for additional staff because we are not in a presidential year. And so this is looking at the numbers of voters that turn out, which I expect to be low, but also considering that the early voting's counting, is catching on. And so I rounded it up a whopping $500 to make an even $6,000 request. So that's where that comes from. If we do decide to do a satellite office, which is a different issue we'll get to, then we would have additional costs supporting that office. So this request here needs to happen no matter how, where, when people vote, because we don't know which way they're going to vote. We don't know if more of them vote by mail is going to get popular or less popular. I am pretty confident the early voting in the office is going to stay popular. It was really nice for people to just be able to come on their day off. We have 2 Saturdays we were open. They really appreciated it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if I might follow up on, you mentioned a satellite office twice. Whose decision is that to open a satellite office?
It's up to you, and with our input, of course.
Well, the other thing is, don't we really have 4 years to do this? This is a presidential election. We don't have another presidential election for 4 years. This is historically our biggest turnout. This year's gubernatorial elections. The next year is congressional elections only and no statewide candidate. And the following year after that is the House of Delegates and Senate with no statewide candidate. So don't we have a little time to work on this?
Yes and no. So the COVID problem, I don't believe is going to be solved by this November. I would love it if it is, but I'm not terribly optimistic the way the vaccines are rolling out. The anticipated volume in my office is about 2/3 to 3/4 of what we saw for the presidential election, based on the numbers that I've been able to see, running reports in Veris for the last 20 years or so. So it's not going to be, the June election I'm not worried about at all. I'm not going to need any extra help for June. That's, going to be simple. But it's only the November election that concerns me. And yes, I do not expect it to be as crazy as it was last November. But I do, like I said, I expect at least 2/3, maybe 70%, something like that. So it's still a lot to handle.
And a lot of costs are fixed cost, whether we have 100 people or 1,000 people.
And if I might, one more. Are there any monies in the upcoming budget that the General Assembly is working on now to help you with this?
None that we're aware of, unfortunately.
In fact, it's probably the opposite. They're right now changing laws as we speak again to fix the laws last year. They're just, it looked like it's going to be worse, and there's going to be more costs unfunded for this year than last year.
Yeah, an example is the voting by mail. We were required at the last minute this year to add labels, one, so we could do ballot tracking with Ballot Scout. And B, we had to have return postage on the envelopes that were maybe coming back. Unfortunately, that wastes a lot of postage for all those people who didn't return their ballots or who chose to bring them in. The state is supposed to reimburse us from last November's postage, but they've said nothing about reimbursing us going forward. So that could easily be another $500 that we have to spend next fall. I didn't bother to adjust my postage budget. I think I can handle that. But there's just a lot of expenses with elections that they mandate that unfortunately the counties have to pick up.
And they keep coming up with these mandates even up until probably a month before the election last year. We kept getting new mandates. We see that's already going on. We don't know how many of these laws that they're changing down there are going to pass, because it's something we have to deal with, you know. We have to do what they say, but we don't have any input into what they do. We just have to do it.
And these mandates are coming down from a state board of elections?
Yes.
Well, it's the legislator is passing the laws, then the state board has to implement
But
it.
the legislation's laws go into effect July 1, so you have notice on those. If you're getting something a month out, then that's not the legislature doing that.
No,
That's
typically-
somebody else doing it, I don't know
Well,
who.
if you remember last year, they were in session in July or in September, no, I mean, they forever were and they kept changing laws. It was just crazy. Every day or two, we'd get a notice, you know. It would be from elect, they love to come in like 9, 10 o'clock at night. You know, this is new guidance on something that we had to do.
That there's both the law and then there's elect's interpretation of the law, and there are directives, and sometimes they are in conflict. Most of the time they agree, and elect is taking it a step further and defining further what we have to live with, what we have to do. So, but yes, it does tend to be last minute changes, hopefully not as bad this year as last year. Okay.
Are you
All right.
planning on going through each one of these?
Slides?
Yes.
Yes. Is that okay?
It would run a little, almost right on time. So-
Okay. I can talk really fast, if that works. If you don't mind, I would like to go through, because I think it's important to consider what we've got to do for safety. So the front office is the picture of the front office in my office. This is where we were voting people. We had 3 voting booths. You can barely see the window back there. That's where we're checking people in. For safety, we should have only had 2 or 3 voters in there at once, and there were many times when I spotted 8 or 10 voters in there. That was really not good, and I was unfortunately sometimes wrestling with my help to push people back outside. So we are limited to the 3 voting booths, and like I said, voters were tripping over each other. There's no place to wait out of the weather. So we have 2 proposals for safe and efficient voting for the early voting. One is remodel my office. The second is to use part of the community center as a satellite voting center. The remodeling is the one that the board and I prefer. We think it's the wiser choice. The 2 aspects to the remodeling, one would be to remove part of that wall where you see the white poster on the right. As you enter the front office, we would open up that wall and make kind of an L-shaped with the office next to it. The second part of the proposed remodeling is to add a portico on the front there that would come out towards the end of the brick wall and would give people a covered place to wait out of the weather. So, opening that one wall, this is a picture of the office we're talking about joining to my front office. Currently, Gail works in there, and we have a lot of temporary work tables, things like that. So opening that almost doubles our space. It adds 165 square feet. And it allows us to have a check-in desk where you see Gail sitting there, as well as one at the front window, and very easily have 2 people checking in, which was also a problem this time. We could increase the number of booths. We figure we can get 5 or 6 voting booths in there safely, and we therefore can increase voter throughput. The slowdowns are checking people in and people deciding what they're going to vote on the ballot. So the check-in booths are a limitation for us now. So there's still limited space to wait out of the weather, but it would, if we can do the portico also, it would help a lot. And as you know, the CARES Act money and the CTCL loan, or excuse me, grant was used to buy easy carts, which are these big cages that hold the election equipment. Those are due to come either this week or next week finally. And that will allow us to consolidate all of our stuff in the back office so that we can move Gail and all of our other things into the back part of my building. So pros and cons. Ooh, I can't even read that. If you would like, Sammy, I'd be happy to skip the pros and cons and let you read them on your own. Does that work for you?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay. So let's get down to the, okay. There we go. So we'll get down to the funding on each of these. For the remodeling, I put in a placeholder of $20,000 to this year's budget. It is just a rough estimate. Susan said we can get a contractor out, but I certainly wasn't going to do anything like that until I saw whether you were interested in approaching this or not. The satellite office has a much higher ongoing cost, but a slightly lower cost this year. One of the things that you have to do if you do a satellite office is I still have to vote people in my office. It's required by law to do both. So that makes it difficult to have people know where they can go. We could, obviously have signage when it gets crowded in my office. You can tell people go over to the community center, but it's going to be a real education issue. And because we don't need it in all of the primaries and the smaller elections, I think that would be very confusing to have it one time and not have it another time. It requires a lot of staffing. You have to have a legal minimum of 3 people sitting over at the community center, and you might have 50 voters that day. That's an awful lot of staff time that you got to pay for. It requires electronic poll books, which is not something we have looked at yet. But you can't check in 11,780 voters with paper poll books at one location. It just would not work. So we got some advertising costs, more cleaning of that building, and my estimate is that it comes up to a one-time expense of $3,000 for the poll books and an ongoing annual expense of about $12,000.
To answer your question earlier about who decide on the satellite, it's the same procedure we would use for moving a regular precinct. There's a lot to it. There's public hearings. There's a whole list of stuff in the code. It takes, I think, at least 60 days to go through all the procedures. And then the state has to get involved in it too.
So,
They're not going to pay for it, but they're going to have say-so in it.
yeah. So the satellite office offers more space and even safer than remodeling my office, but I don't think it's a good choice for the county. We just wanted to give you some ideas and some alternatives to think about. So, any other questions?
Any questions? Mr. Hinkle?
I keep hearing the safe. Is the safety the only reason you remodel your office?
No, because we really had trouble just physically getting the people around to their voting booths, around to the machine. They were literally tripping over one another. So safety is a big concern right now, of course, but just voter throughput and not having people standing outside that long in the hot sun. It was warm enough, they were complaining about the hot sun and the rain and all of that. So it's really more of a voter throughput. If you look at the size of even our smallest precinct, it's 3 times the size of that front office I have. Any other questions?
Well, we thank you all for coming by and providing us with this information.
Thank you. And sorry to take up so much of your time.
So much our mind.
Can understand.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Adams, did you have anything else for the work session? Okay, thank you. Okay, citizen public comment period is next. This time is provided by the board to allow citizens the opportunity to address the board on issues of importance to the citizen. No individual citizen shall be permitted to address the board for more than 3 minutes. Anyone sign up back there?
I signed up.
Yeah, he's coming with. Oh, okay. You already on the agenda?
Oh, okay, because I asked and they told me they didn't see me, so.
Yes, ma'am. Everything's fine. Is it anyone in the audience that would like to address the board that failed to sign up? Okay. Thank you. Excuse me. Next scheduled is appearances. And we are happy to have with us Mr. Aaron Hawkins, CPA and CFE of Robinson, Farmer, Cox and Associates. Please come on up, sir. He's coming. Welcome.
Thought I might have some instant theme music.
Oh, I thought you was bringing glazed donuts or something. So anytime you're ready, sir.
Right on. Thank you all for having me this evening. Obviously here to present the fiscal year 2020 financial report, which you're getting in your hands right now, and hopefully you've had a chance to look at maybe a PDF circulating. I'm going to kind of keep this somewhat brief. As usual, I've kind of just flagged some pages to go over in this, and then assuming you've had some PDFs of the report, you may have some questions for me. I'd be glad to go over them with you, and if you have any questions after tonight, I'd be more than glad to make myself available, be a phone call later on. So let's get down to it. First page is the report on the audit, which includes our audit opinion. This is a very standard report/opinion, which is an unmodified opinion, which is the best that we can give as auditors. What it basically says is that the financial statements that follow this page are free of any material misstatement or error based on the testing that we've done. I'm going to jump ahead to page 15, and this is where you see your change in your fund balances for the year. Really very limited change from the prior year to this year in terms of you're still sitting at about $18.5 million of fund balance. Total between your general fund, your capital projects, and then other governmental funds. And most of that is unassigned fund balance. So if you look back to page 13, you see the breakdown of those fund balance numbers as to whether they're restricted, committed, assigned, or unassigned. And so really that's almost a more important number to look at, which is your unassigned, which is, hey, of that fund balance, this is what we have at our discretion that isn't already, either assigned or committed or restricted for a specific purpose. Jumping ahead to page 18, this is your proprietary fund for the sanitary district. The net position increased quite a bit, $1.8 million increase from 2.9 up to 4.7. This is because of transfers that came in, I believe, from the general fund. Someone may want to. It's been so long since I've looked at that number. Was there some sort of a payment? Susan might be able to help me out, but I'm not sure. Was there a retirement of debt or something in the utility fund, and that's what that transfer was for? That's what I thought. So there was transfers that came in from the general fund to pay off some long-term obligations. So that's why you see that increase over in your sanitary district. Jumping ahead much further to page 121 is your supplementary schedules 1 and 2. I always like to point these out because I think they're pretty handy for you to look at and see how you perform during the year with your actual numbers versus your budget. Schedule 1 is your revenues and Schedule 2 is your expenditures. And this has all your governmental funds and also your school board funds as well. I'm going to skip ahead to page 137, which I think is always a table that most most folks on the board like to look at and being cognizant of what property tax collections are looking like and percentages. And we present the last 10 years of data in these tables. And your 2020 year, the current year was 92%, and total levy was 97%. So, pretty in line with the previous 2 years of collections. And then the one other thing I wanted to point out in the report is it's the last page. I didn't want you to think, if you were looking through this report and you happen to see this, you might think that we had a current year finding. That's not what this is. It's actually the finding that we had to put in last year's report related to the budget ad at the school board, I think, where they didn't give enough days notice. We have to put the prior year finding in the report as well. So there has been corrective action. There was not a repetitive finding for that this year. But it's just one of those things that we're required to include a finding that we had in there last year just for disclosure purposes. So that was the last pages I wanted to go over in the report. From the audit process itself, owe a lot of thanks to all the different departments that help us, getting through the audit, from the people here at the county and administration and the treasurer's office and at the school board as well. It wasn't a normal process, to say the least. We did quite a bit of work remotely this year, which is probably kind of a good thing for our business, I think, and limiting how much time we have to spend on site. Obviously, there was a new accounting system put in place during the year. It took quite a bit of work, I think, with folks here at the county as well as the consultant, Mary Earhart, to kind of pull things together to get them ready for audit at the end of the year. Basically, the county was kind of getting to a point where they were on two different systems. I think kind of the RDA system, which was kind of used for the payables and your expenditures, and then you had kind of the Bright accounting system that you used to use, and that was still kind of being used for the revenue side, and as well as reconciling your bank accounts. So it was a matter of kind of pulling all those into agreement to make them in concert with each other. And you got to a good point where your consultant helped you get there. And from talking to Vicki, the treasurer, she said she sounds like here in FY21 things are great and reconciled and good moving forward. So that is good to hear. But it was one of those things I did want to make you aware of it, that during the year there was some moments where I think they were behind in getting those things reconciled. And so when you have two pieces, can I keep the mask on or take it off? Or
You can take it off.
all right. Struggling there with my breath. So when you have two different systems, it's really important to reconcile those things, because when you don't, you can find yourself in a hole, and the hole just keeps getting deeper and deeper. And when you guys get the financial information every month, you need to make sure it's good information. So those systems need to be reconciled. But from what I'm told, it does sound like here in FY21 so far that they are reconciled, and that moving forward, there's a lot of confidence that will continue. I still would say that, for a long term, looking down the road, like what's ideal, I do think it would be great to be on just one system. It's just my honest opinion as an accountant who's been auditing governments for about 15 years. I've seen systems where you do have, these two different systems, and you bring them together and it works as long as you reconcile it. But I do think for a long-term vision, I do think it would be in the best interest of the county to really be on one system.
Let me ask you this.
Yes, sir.
On page 139 on the tax rates,
Yes.
it has slipped my mind completely, but I didn't realize that we had the lowest tax rate really since 2015. It was 65 cents. Is that correct?
That's what it looks like.
And that is good to know.
I'm not sure why the forward banding looks a little bit different on 2016 and 17. It's driving me nuts a little bit right now to look at that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. The real estate rate went down by 2 cents per $100.
Beautiful.
Now, collective is,
Right.
now, collective is, just talking about reading that.
Progress.
Yeah, if you look at the next, if you're looking at that table 5 and you're trying to kind of piece together that puzzle and to why, like looking at the assessed values are on the next table, table 6. Table 6, and I'm pretty sure we normally update these for supplements and abatements done during the year as well. So it looks like merchants capital, the assessed values went up quite a bit there. That could have something to do with, real estate went down, rates went down by 2%, by 2 cents per 100, but the levy amount was more. What's going on? That's probably, that probably has something to do with it.
Well, at any rate, it's positive. Well, Mr. Hawkins, what else you have to present?
Well, I don't know that I really had anything else flagged. One thing I did think about was, obviously with COVID being such a thing, and thinking about CARES money that you've received. This would have been back on a previous page we looked at, but you right now, as of June 30th, you had about 1,349,000 in unearned revenue. That's basically where that money, I can't remember how much you got initially, but how much you received that you haven't spent, basically. I thought that might be something that could be worth pointing out to you. You sort of see that on your page 13. Those were funds, CARES money that was received by the county that, as of June 30th, had not been spent yet. Yeah, so that was, for most of the counties that I audit, that was typically the case, was as of June 30th. Not very much had been spent, but it sounds like since then, much of it has. And so, really, so it wasn't, when we do our federal audit work that we have to do for the county, basically we have what's called Type A programs and Type B programs. And if you have over $750,000, it becomes a Type A. And you have to audit those every 3 years. And so for most of my counties, that CARES money that was actually spent in the year never really got above 750, but for FY21, it's going to be above that for many of mine. So it'll become one of those Type A programs that we have to audit specifically for single audit purposes. But no, I had nothing else to go over, and really was just standing here in case anyone else had any questions for me. And
Okay, any questions from any member? Well, we certainly do appreciate you coming and talking about the audit report to us, highlighting certain things that's of particular interest to us. And I'm sure if we go back and research and do some more reading and all, we'll contact our county administrator. She'll contact.
anytime,
Put a good
anytime.
job on.
We're available all year long, so.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion, we adopt the annual financial report for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020.
Motion been duly made. Is there a second? Discussion?
Well, I said adopt, I guess it's accept.
Further discussion? We have a roll call vote. Mr. Hinkle? Mr. Hips? Mr. Abbott? Mr. Hogan?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. Thank you, sir.
Thank you all. Have a nice evening.
Yeah, you too. Safe journey home. Next, we have Mr. Warren Kane, the CEO of B2X Online. Welcome, sir.
Hello again.
It's always good to see you.
It's good to see you guys, too. I do want to say thank you very much for having me back to be able to talk about what has changed and what has happened and to talk about the direction of the internet and the project and where it is currently at. I did bring some numbers with me, and I'll get into those numbers here in a few minutes. Where we stand is we have installed all of the towers except for the Evergreen Tower, and that's the one with Southside. That is actually a problem. We've been working with them to finalize an agreement. It appeared that they have a 4-layer or 3-layer contract, one with the landowner, one with the tower company, one with the other leaser, and then the other one was with us. And so we've been working since we started this project, trying to get that to where everybody agreed to let us be on the tower. We have finally reached an agreement.
All right.
So that means that we're ready to go. We actually have the agreement in front of us. We'll end up probably signing it this week and sending it back to them, and then all those parties will have to sign it and make it move forward. My question, I know that would be, if I was in your point, what does that mean for you guys? What that means for you guys is all the equipment has already been purchased. Everything that the county has purchased is sitting in either in one of the warehouses that is here or else it's at our building. So what will happen is as soon as that is signed and we get an NTP, notice to proceed, we will go install that. And that will be the last tower to be installed, which is a great thing. Some of the, where do the other towers stand? Like I said, they're all installed. I'll start over to the left because I've got a board in my office with it drawn on there, so I have to, if I do that, it'll keep me organized as I start going down the thought process here. Kingston, Spout Springs location, that is completely installed and has been ready for power, and we have been waiting on power since November, and we have been waiting on power to show up. It is with Dominion Power. And there has been some issues about whether or not the address is correct. And where it stands now is they finally figured out what the address was, and they have now resubmitted it one more time, and now it's back with another department for them to figure out if they can come turn it on. That's all that's waiting on that one. It has been installed since November, and we've been waiting for power for that one since November.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
isn't that on our water tower?
No, sir.
That's a different one.
It's on Crown Castle Tower. The next tower is Tower Hill, which is right up here behind Walmart. That one was with Central Virginia Co-op. Central Virginia also was having trouble coming out and turning that one on. I have no idea why. I went by there again. I went by there tonight on my way home here. I almost called this home. And went by there and realized that they have successfully turned power on. We haven't got the notice from them that it's on yet, but it is powered on. So that means we can actually turn that site on and actually start making that happen. The next site, which is Morningstar, which is also a Crown Castle tower, that site has been installed since mid-November, and we were waiting on power. They finally have power on that site, and they had power on that site at the end of January. So that one was ready to go. Unfortunately, we also have to have the sites turned on, and they all have to link together for them to be able to get internet. Because not only is once the site comes on, we have to have it linked to the internet for it to be able to provide internet. So Morningstar and Kingston were both isolated. The one that links them together is Tower Hill. Now that Tower Hill has power, we can begin providing internet on those towers.
Is this typical?
I have never in my life seen power take so long to be turned on at a site. Normally, it takes about 3 weeks and it's done. I've never seen something like that. Now, we do have, the final tower is the Pamplin Tower. The Pamplin Tower is installed, and it has been providing service, and it is online and providing internet. Well, it was till yesterday.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Evans?
if I might, on those towers that don't have power, haven't been linked because we haven't, if I could ask the county administrator, call Central Virginia and remind them of the tax break they got to put the stuff here they did and how well we worked with them. Tell them we need it turned on. I would also, if you've got a problem with Dominion, call our senators and House of Delegates. They can get them moving faster than anybody else.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evans.
Yeah, right now, our initial problem right now is Dominion Power. And once that is done, that'll be up and running. So where does this stand? This means that we're providing service. And when I said Pamplin has been up and running, providing service for a while, the thing is this ice storm just snapped 2 telephone poles in front of the building and took all power down, and we can't even get up to the tower to do anything with it at the moment. So we're waiting for that to be done. We're working with the power company to move some of that out of the way, so at least we can go in there and turn the generator on because we couldn't remotely do that. However, they have told us it will be a couple days yet before we'll be able to get to it. It doesn't look that bad outside because I was driving along looking and expecting to see it just, an ice age going on here, but up in Pamplin, just a little bit further north, that's what we're fighting. And also elevations. And some of those elevations are still causing us problems. So it doesn't sound super exciting, but the real excitement here is that we do have all the equipment installed, except for that one tower. We are ready to go ahead and start turning up customers on those towers as soon as I get it connected to the internet. By the end of this week, we will have all of those towers connected that have power. That means that once that's done, the next step is provisioning with the FCC to allow us to transmit. Once we get that provisioning done, which usually takes 1 to 2 days per tower, we can start transmitting. And at that point, we can actually start getting to all these people that are waiting to have service. Some of these people, we actually did what was called a pre-install, meaning that we blindly went out and installed them and aimed them at the tower that we knew that they would get service from. We did that so that way, once the tower comes up, we can remotely turn it on, see the customers, they will attach the towers, we can remotely provision them, and turn them on without having to go back out and actually go to the customer's house.
That is music to our ears. But also, we have the superintendent of schools here, Dr. Bennett. I know that's music to her ear.
Can't wait.
One of the things I really want to say is that we had all of the gear installed on all the towers we had permission to before the end of December. And we were really excited, and we were really moving forward, and we just knew any moment they were going to have the power turned on to those locations. And we've worked with 3 electricians trying to get the power turned on because we were thinking, okay, well, maybe it's something we're not doing. And one of the electricians that we've been dealing with all the way through now, David, has done a wonderful job, and he's been right there as an advocate. He's called some of them daily. We've been calling some of them daily, to the point where I know most of the people in the offices at Central Virginia. And so I'm glad that we finally got this moving forward. And I think we're just moments in the scheme of things. We're moments away from having it completed, which would be fantastic. So before I go into that, did you guys have any questions about the towers or anything?
In Any questions from any members?
on the
Mr.
tower side.
Chairman,
Mr. Abbott?
I would like, if you could, to give us a weekly update on the holdups you've got. You're talking about these, just an email to this board and to Susan. If you, I don't know whether you got time to do it or not, but it'd be nice to know, I don't think most of us were aware of these holdups. And there are some things that can be done to move them. Okay, so can we
Open
get,
for that.
let's say a Friday morning, afternoon email from you about whose hands these are in and what's holding them up?
I can. Usually, John and I usually have a conversation at least once a week, and I email him once a week with some information to let him know how things are moving forward. I don't get into a lot of the holdups, but we usually speak at least once a week or at least once every
Right.
other week
If you could,
and do that.
you could just do it to the board, I would appreciate it until we get these problems ironed out.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. So one of the next steps I'd like to go into is how many people have actually contacted us. We sent out a really large advertising campaign with Google and also with Facebook, and targeted the areas that we knew were within 5 miles of the towers and also in the other immediate areas as a side note to see what was going on. We've had over 22,000 people actually throughout the entire 2 counties that are around here actually look at it. To me, it was a little high, but that's what the numbers show. We've had over 1,200 people actually come and visit the website and actually look at the data and either decide to sign up or whatever they decided to do. For that, we've had 322 people in Appomattox that have that have qualified for service. So in other words, those people are within 5 miles of one of those towers and have qualified for service. Out of those people, we've sent out 152 service agreements to them because they decided they wanted to go ahead and go with the service either now or in the future. And so we've got those sent out. Out of the 152, we've had 98 people returned the service agreement signed and said, please sign us up. And out of those people, we've installed 77 of them. And at the moment, since we only have the 1 tower up, there's only 6 people receiving service at the moment. And I think we finally got you some sort of service too. She was unable, Miss Adams was unable to get it off of the Pamplin Tower. She was too far past the cone of the transmit, but we were able to get her off of one of the other services that we do provide. So I guess that's really all I had.
Any further questions for Mr. Kane?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Hope?
how many of those, I guess, 77 pre-installs, do you know, or do you even have these figures, were student households?
I do not. What we were looking at was, and I think we winding back for some of our other conversations, we had talked about that was a priority for everyone to be at that level to make sure the students had the ability to be able to get the service first. What we looked at was how many customers would the system be able to support and how many customers would be able to get the service, and also how many were subsidized by the county. So at this moment, we looked at the 77 of them, and we'd come and wrestled with, at this moment, the number is still at the lower level that we didn't actually start pre-qualifying on that level. Now, one of the towers, I think it's Morningstar, no, not Morningstar, it's Tower Hill Tower. That one there has a lot of people signed up for it. So we've actually stopped because we had to look at and say, okay, now we've got to say, if you're a student now, you have the priority to step in front of these other people. And that's how we're looking at it now. I've also had some other conversations with superintendent, and we've talked about some other ideas. And we've had some conversations about that too, that we need to now that we're actually starting to get to this point where it's all starting to really start moving, which it will, we need to really make sure that we qualify the students and use that money towards them more than we do just the general public. So we are paying attention to that, but at this moment, I do not have those figures with me.
Any additional questions? Well, thank you, sir. Thank you for coming by.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Hope.
I just want to reiterate what Mr. Abbott said. You know, if you're having problems, because we all thought this was going to be done by January 1.
Me too.
And that's what we were told. And to spend the amount of money we've spent to have 6 people on, or 6 households, that's very disappointing.
It is.
So I hear what you're saying. The equipment is there, all except one tower. We're just waiting on power.
Yes, sir.
So if we'd have known that 2 months ago, we might have could have done something about it. But yeah, let's stay in touch, and let's get this stuff turned on.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. You have a
Thank you.
safe trip to your residence.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, next we have Janet Morrison and Annie Trent, Carver Price Legacy Museum Board. Welcome.
I think we have a little team here.
Welcome to the whole team.
Good evening.
Good
My
evening.
name is Harold Watkins. I'm a member of Carver Price Legacy Museum. I'm a graduate from Carver Price, 1961. And we'd like to thank y'all for giving us the opportunity to speak on our board. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Emily Sayers, and I'm going to present a short history of the Carver Price School. So when we talk about the Carver Price School, we're talking about the left-hand building that you see there today. At the beginning of the 20th century, there were about 15 one-room black elementary schools in the county, but there was no black high school. And in 1919, Mrs. Mozella Price was hired as a supervisor at black schools in Appomattox. And she began working on a plan for a black high school called the Appomattox Training School. In 1928, a small frame Rosenwald school was housed with 3 teachers for elementary and high school, and that was built on the 27-acre site.
Excuse me, ma'am. Can you speak into the microphone where everyone can?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all
Yeah,
right.
is that better?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, thank you. What is a Rosenwald school, you might ask? Julius Rosenwald was a successful businessman who partnered with Sears of Sears and Roebuck. And he worked his way up to becoming the president of Sears in 1908. And when Sears went public, Rosenwald found himself to be a very wealthy man. And he started a foundation to help worthy causes. In collaboration with Booker T. Washington, Rosenwald and Washington built more than 5,000 schools, shops, and teachers' homes in the South over about a 50-year period. To qualify for a Rosenwald grant, the black community had to raise funds for the land and provide labor and materials for the buildings. The white community had to administer and run the schools as well as contribute money. In this way, the Rosenwald schools became a vital part of the entire community. By 1928, 1/3 of black students in the South were attending a Rosenwald school. Back in Appomattox, with more enrollment and fundraising, a new 4-room brick Rosenwald school was built on the site, which opened in May of 1930. More rooms were added, and during the 1934-35 school year, the name was changed to George Washington Carver High School in honor of the most famous American Black scientist. More classrooms were added in 1951, and at the dedication, the name was again changed to Carver Price High School to honor Mrs. Mosella Price. In 1964, 11 new classrooms and an auditorium were added, and Black one-room schools were closed, and Carver Price School began to house grades 1 through 12. After the 1954 Supreme Court decision on segregation, the need for the Rosenwald schools declined, and many of them fell into decay and were torn down. In 2002, the National Register of Historic Places finally recognized the significance of saving these early examples of Black education. Of the 380 Virginia Rosenwald schools, only 33% are still standing, and we're lucky to have one. So that is one reason it's so important for us to save this Rosenwald school as part of our Virginia and Appomattox heritage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Good evening to the ones on the dais. My name is Anna Trent, and I'm a 1967 graduate of Carver, and I am an original member of the newly reconstructed Board of Directors of the Carver Price Legacy Museum, as well as an interested citizen. On behalf of the Carver Price Legacy Museum, and especially those understand that preserving the heritage of the Black citizens of Appomattox is a benefit to all of us, I offer 3 requests which will be instrumental in the success of the efforts of the museum. A copy of this information is in the packet that each of you received prior to this meeting. Number 1, extend the lease from 5 years to 25 years, also making a change in the lease from the Carver Price Alumni Association to the Carver Price Legacy Museum, Incorporated. We will also ask for number 2, to grant permission for the school to be placed on the National Registry and of the historic places. I will read the last email from Mike Punis, the architectural historian from the Western Region Office of the Virginia Department of Historic Resources, that was sent on January 27, 2021 to Susan and I. And it reads, quote, "The Department of Historic Resources has grant funds reserved for nomination, which would include all parts of the school and the 2 auxiliary buildings on the property. The project could begin by this spring or summer. In order for us to begin the project, we will need an official email or letter from the county stating that they will not object to the National Registry listing and that access to the building. If necessary, will be provided a consultant hired by DHR to prepare the nomination. Please direct any correspondence to me," unquote. And number 3, and we are asking for written permission from the Board of Supervisors, granting support for the Carver Price Legacy Museum to apply and use grants funds to preserve the collection of artifacts and improve the architectural status of the Rosenwald building through necessary interior repairs and safety structural updates. Thank you for your attention. Now I give you Dr. Janice Morrison.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board of Supervisors. We do come with a team tonight. I am Janice Marston. I'm a retired educator here, and I'm also a retired grants consultant. It's my pleasure to serve as coordinating director of the Carver Price Legacy Museum Board of Directors. Perhaps spending over 10 years as principal of this school building makes me caringly biased. So I'd like to begin tonight with just several clarifications for you. Carver Price Legacy Museum is not a political nor activist group, nor are we aligned with any such community groups. Number 2, Carver Price Legacy Museum has one goal: to preserve the historical structure, which is the Rosenwald School building and former Carver Price High School. The African American population's history is in danger of being lost. Number 3, we're not here to ask for money. We're here to seek your support in making our work in this effort possible. We ask your consideration of the 3 requests presented to you by Andy Trent related to Board of Supervisors support and permissions. Number 4, I can't go on without this. We sincerely thank you, the Board of Supervisors, for your efforts over the past decade in leasing the building to the Carver Price Alumni Association and in providing the in-kind support you have provided. Here's where we are. With a newly restructured board and strong community interest, we feel we're on the brink of accomplishing the goals for which this organization has worked for many years. It's important to know that the Carver Price Legacy Museum was incorporated in 2016 to focus on preservation and education. The deep desire of this museum is and always has been to honor the history which spans from 1865, when 4,600 Black Americans living in the county became free citizens. That was approximately half of the county's population at that time. The first opportunities for education began on the site of the Rosenwald portion of the building here in Appomattox. Furthermore, Appomattox, more specifically George Washington Carver High School, holds a unique place in American history that cannot be overlooked. When Prince Edward County schools closed their doors based on Brown versus the Board of Education legislation, Black students from Prince Edward County sought refuge here. I'm aware that this group has appeared before you over the last decade, but what I want to do tonight is assure you that we are alive and well. Our planning committee has met either weekly or bi-weekly since August. We have defined the plan of work which needs to be done and are moving toward those goals. I ask you this evening to see us with new eyes. When COVID settles down, we expect to see a reimagined, state-of-the-art museum in this community. Long term, we expect to restore other parts of the building as we progress through the stages and acquire funding. Within the last week, we were informed of a state budget amendment, which will provide significant financial assistance toward this effort. I invite you to refer to the booklet you received in your packet, and I just want to make several notes about what you might find in there. I certainly won't take time to read through that with you, but I want you to realize that we now have a diverse board, including expanded community interest. We've adopted a new strategic plan, vision, and mission statement with working committees for each of those goals. What do we expect to accomplish? We will apply for local, state, and federal grants to enable us to be self-sustaining in the preserving of the museum collection and making improvements to the structure of the Rosenwald and other portions of the building. The longer we wait, the greater danger of artifacts deteriorating and the building as well. We know that there are numerous federal grants available to preserve civil rights history. However, to be considered, we have to have 2 things. First, written permission from the owners of the building. We started recently working on a grant we thought we would be able to acquire, and before we even got into it, we realized that our timeline was too short and we could not even contact you yet about the written permission for the building, but as owners of the building, we do need your permission, and also placement on the National Register of Historic Places. I've placed a handout within your packet that explains the pros and cons of National Registry in case you have questions about that. But our mission is more than about the building. It extends to the heritage of the Black citizens of our community, their heritage from slavery, something most of us don't understand in early Appomattox, to their education as freed Black Americans. To the change, we look at the change in the buildings from being simply a Black high school to an integrated school that educated students of both colors in this county. No other museum in this community offers this kind of opportunity. Surrounding communities have moved forward with similar efforts and with significant support. I have several others will share information about what we're working on and how we're going through with that. But I'd like to say this to you. In closing, I'm an advocate for education. Always have been, always will be. I joined this effort in the summer of 2020 because I care and I want to be a part of a solution that will bring good things to this community. Our shared efforts will result in a state-of-the-art museum, which showcases our community support, honors the Black and white heritage of our community, and builds on the tourism economy of Appomattox, and creates a seamless way forward for all people. And we'll be glad to ask your questions after the other presenters. Thank you. Yes.
Could I ask Dr. Morrison or Mrs. Trent, would it uncomplicate matters for you if we, instead of a 25-year lease, transferred the title of the school to you all? You don't have to answer me now, but would you?
I think you'd get a rejoicing yes. Yes. It would be wonderful. Thank you for suggesting that.
Excuse me for my outburst, but we have worked on this as a board member for so very long. That's music to our ears.
It is. Now I'd like to introduce Ann Roos. She is the from the Appomattox Courthouse National Historic Park.
Good evening. My name is Ann Roos. I'm a museum curator for the National Park Service. I work at the Appomattox Courthouse National Historic Park here in Appomattox. I've worked there and been a resident of Appomattox County for a little over a year now. And I just want to reiterate that the Appomattox Courthouse National Historical Park, administered by the National Park Service, continues to partner with the Carver Price Legacy Museum. Our superintendent, Robert Schneider, serves as a liaison to the museum's board. She's actually been on a detail the last several months, but she's now back in Appomattox and looks forward to serving in an advisory capacity to the board moving forward. The park is committed to exploring themes of the local and national connections between the surrender at Appomattox and the nation's journey to the civil rights movement of the mid-20th century, and exploring how this journey manifested in this region through education, voting rights, economic opportunities, and representation. The National Park Service administers hundreds of thousands of dollars in grant money to funding projects for African American civil rights projects, the history of equal rights projects, and projects supporting underrepresented communities. I'm confident that the Carver Price Legacy Museum is competitively positioned to receive one or more of these grants. They need your help with support for applying for grants, and it also helps their chances if they are listed on the National Register of Historic Places, if the structure is. I'm also utilizing my expertise in museum collection management and curation to assist the museum with their collections and exhibits. And you've all received a handout of, this is a product that my colleague at the park, David Woolridge, created to illustrate some of our brainstorming of an exhibit that we're working on at the museum. We've established a preservation and education committee to begin the process of properly documenting the artifacts in the museum with the help of the Appomattox County High School. We'll be holding a collection handling and cataloging workshop for the committee and student interns at the high school. And the high school has also generously donated money for supplies for that project. The committee is also developing an exhibit focused on the school's athletic program and legacy, and that's the handout you received. We intend to conduct oral histories with past student athletes and coaches in preparation for developing this thematic exhibit on the experience of Black athletes in Appomattox. The museum has provided funds for us to develop the new interpretive panels and signs to tell the story and new exhibit furnishings to display artifacts. And also, before I hand it off, in the booklet you received on part 3 is also a handout I created for the museum that lists not only this exhibit, but also some collections management and exhibit recommendations for the entire museum moving forward. Thank you.
To the Appomattox County Board of Supervisors, good evening.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to appear before you this afternoon. I am Ora McCoy, a lifelong resident of Appomattox County and a proud graduate of Carver Price High School. I was born to George and Eleanor Scruggs in the little village of Vera. My reason for wanting to make Carver Price Legacy Museum a state-of-the-art museum is because of much rich history and personal stories that is needed to be told about Appomattox. My great-grandparents, Phoebe and Daniel Scruggs, were emancipated on April the 9th, 1865, included with the 46 other slaves that were freed on that day. Daniel and Phoebe were married in 1860. During that time, they needed permission to marry because they were slaves. Record shows that Phoebe bore 26 children, in which we can only account for 5. I leave it to your imagination as to what happened to her other babies. Supervisor Abbott, I hope you don't mind if I tell this part of the story. Supervisor Abbott's grandparents and my family lived on adjoining farms. My grandmother was a midwife and delivered most of the Abbott children. Herbert Abbott would joke with me and tell me many stories about my grandmother, Sabra. He said Sabra had a chauffeur back in the day to take her to Lynchburg to deliver other members of the Abbott's family's children. I am eager to learn more about my heritage and all of our history, whether it be black or white, as it relates to Appomattox. There are many stories to be told, the good, the ugly, and the bad. I am proud of my heritage, as many others in the struggle. I want to honor our rich history. By the way, I am proud to say my son and I still own the property adjoining the Abbott's property, and that my ancestors struggled so hard to keep in the family. Near and dear to my heart is Carver Price. We have tried for many years to make history come alive in Carver Price. Now is the time. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shana Canada, and I'm a lifelong resident of Appomattox County. I joined the board due to my friendship with Ora McCoy, and Carver Price was dear to her heart, and it became dear to mine. I now serve as the secretary of the board. Our mission statement at Carver Price is this: we are committed to preserving our unique heritage from slavery to the present, from Civil War to civil rights, to equality and unity for all people. In 1865, Appomattox paved the way for freedom, but African American citizens of this country, they did not truly get a fair shake. We believe that Carver Price can increase education and understanding to our community and beyond, encouraging compassion and developing new opinions about cultural diversity, teaching that it's okay to see differences, but it should never make a difference in how we see or treat or respect one another. With everything that's going on in our world right now, if there's ever been a time for healing to take place, it is now. So we ask you to help us at Carver Price to be a part of that healing in this community. We might not change the world, but we can change Appomattox. Thanks for hearing us tonight.
You all have questions for us?
Any question from any member of the team to the team?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Hinkle.
I'd like to say I'm really impressed by your presentation, and I can feel your heart is in this and what you want to accomplish, and it's exciting. Thank you.
Thank you. It's exciting for us. We appreciate it.
Thank you all. Next is the school, excuse me, coronavirus relief fund and security grant. And Mrs. Adams, are you the spokesperson for this? Okay.
Second.
Motion been duly made and second. Any discussion? We'll have a roll call vote. Mr. Hinkle. Mr. Hibbs. Mr. Abbott. Mr. Hope. I also vote aye. Next is the CVD DC Hazard Mitigation Plan Update. Please find attached some information on the Central Virginia Planning District Commission Hazard Mitigation Plan 2020 update. Ms. Kelly Hitchcock, Planning and Development Director. DC will be at the March meeting of the Board of Supervisors meeting to present the plan. Following her presentation, a resolution to adopt the plan will be available for our consideration. Is this the same plan that she issued to the town council? Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I just have one question. After looking through that plan, did, I know it separated Appomattox County and the town of Appomattox and all the towns and all the counties in the region, but it never mentioned town of Pamplin. And I want to make sure that in one place, it looks like when you click on the town of Pamplin, it takes you to the county's plan. I don't know if somebody could, whether we just kind of did it for them or if they were part of the process. I want to make sure they're covered.
They basically encompass under ours.
They just come under our plan. Okay. That's the only question I had. Thank you.
There's any action item from this? Okay. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, moving on to Commissioner of the Revenue refund request. Mrs. Sarah Henderson, Commissioner of the Revenue, was requesting following to be paid from line item 1209/5803. Refund Financial Services Vehicle Trust, BMW Financial Services, $453.93 for 2020 personal property taxes paid on a leased vehicle. The vehicle was sold August the 7th of 19. Staff recommendation is consider the above funded refund submittal from the Commissioner of Revenue and supplement $453.93 to 1209/5803. No new local funds are required. In the discussion, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we refund the $453.93 as recommended by the Commissioner of the Revenue.
Thank you. Is that second? Further discussion? Well, roll call vote. Mr. Hinkle. Mr. Hibbs. Mr. Abbott. Mr. Hogan. I also vote aye. Next, we have the Mayor Pamphlet. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, would you state your name?
My name is Sarah Hamlet Blackwell.
Sarah Hamlet Blackwell.
Sarah Hamlet Blackwell.
Okay.
Thank you all for having me here and permitting me to speak to you this evening. I'm here to seek the county's support, for the revitalization of the town of Pamplin. We are wanting to apply for a business district revitalization planning grant, with DHDC, and in the upcoming cycle, which is for April, in the amount of $35,000 to $45,000. Our hope and purpose for this grant is to aid in developing a clearly articulated strategy for the revitalization and redevelopment of the town of Pamplin. Now, due to the size of the town, we have to have the county of Appomattox to sign off and act as the fiduciary agent for the grant. We have been told by DHDC or DHCD that this recently instituted policy was in order to make the community development block grant funds available to smaller localities who do not have a staff large enough to handle and administer the funds. So that is our request, is that, we would handle the application and everything, but we are required to have a fiduciary agent in order to administer that.
Mr. Chairman, I might ask, Susan, don't we also do this sometime for the town of Appomattox, for some of their grants, act as fiduciary agent?
The only thing we've acted as fiduciary agent for the town of Appomattox are the CARES funding, not
Okay.
any of the community block grants.
Do you, if I might, Mr. Chairman, do you anticipate any problem with this?
I'm not exactly sure, maybe just a planning grant, but if there's a community block grant, I know it's a lot of work required with that, so I'm not exactly sure unless I talk to DHCD staff about what the requirements. I know the town has done a lot. It's taken a lot of their time when it comes to the community development, but we can help, any other way possible.
Oh.
An alternative would be maybe engaging the PDC to help also.
Does this have any kind of reflection on the water and sewer?
No, from what I'm understanding, it's a revitalization.
Yes.
Is that
Yeah,
correct?
this
So
is
that would be
for-
the storefronts.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
this is only a planning grant, right?
This
It's a
is
planning
just the
grant for
planning
that.
grant for the downtown area. Our hope is with that, because that is also where the western terminus of the High Bridge Trail is going to end. Our hope is to have, to revitalize that area with the hopes that we are going to have, more traffic once that trail has finished. And they have in the last couple of months finished up with the land agreement between Norfolk Southern and the Parks Department.
This is not a matching grant.
No, this is 100% funded by them.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Hope.
when does the town need to know something?
We're hoping to apply in April, so hopefully within the next month.
So if it's just a planning grant, maybe Ms. Adams can help us here. If it's just a planning grant, being that we're only being asked to be the fiduciary agent for the planning grant. So basically it's,
At this point, however, because we want to make sure that what we are doing, is clearly articulated, that it is, viable for that area and that it is something that can be self-sustaining. Our hope is after that, and this is with our grants writer, Elizabeth Mitchell, with her communication with the, with the governing agencies have been that this is the best. This improves our chances for getting the larger grants when you come to them with a clear plan that you get from these planning grants. So we do hope to be able to apply for that, in the future.
so if you're successful with the planning grant, and are able to apply for a larger community development grant,
Yes.
then obviously that's going to be a lot more money, a lot more time, a lot more, but you could put in the grant
But
to
that
pay
is,
somebody to manage.
and that is my understanding, is that part of the grant can help it pay for staff, but it is solely based on the size of the municipality that we are not able to self-administer. So there could be built into the grant funds for additional staffing, on the county level to do that. Just it's a size thing.
So the Pamplin Town Council has fully endorsed this and ready to move on.
Yes.
Ms. Adams, do we have the staff available to administer a planning grant at this point?
I know for the CDBG grant that we got for the tornado, the PDC administered that because you have to seek engineering services and architectural services. You've got to, it's more than just the grant itself. There are a lot of various services you have to seek out in that grant. And it does pay them to do it, so we could probably make that connection and we could be the fiscal agent because there's a series of reports you have to submit online. You have to keep all the documentation and go through the auditing process and everything because it's federal funds. It's not state funds.
So could we get some information from the PDC and have this on the agenda next month so we could get it, so they could apply by their deadline?
Yeah. So
I think the application itself is very simple for the planning grant. It's just a matter of administering it once it's awarded.
Well, and we also, we do have like a part-time staff individual who is working with grants. So, you know, with the additional funds to add that in, to be able to have a person to be doing that, we do have that already in place.
Has any contact been made with PDC?
That I'm not 100% sure of, because that would have been done by Elizabeth.
But administering the grant and being the fiduciary agents, two different
Two
things.
separate things, yes.
So all they're asking is for us to be the
Correct.
the fiscal agent, just take the money in and send the money out, correct?
Yes.
So if we're gonna do the fiscal part, who's gonna do the administering part?
Correct.
Does anybody know the answer to that question yet?
I mean, that has been our plan, and that is the way that it was framed to us, that we needed a fiduciary agent for that. So that is my understanding, but I can get further clarification for the next board meeting if necessary.
Let's also ask Mr. Latchney, do you have any kind of comment on this?
No, you're just talking about functional application.
For grant writing services, I think she's already acquired Mrs. Mitchell. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so if awarded, then that's where we would be the fiduciary agent.
Okay.
And we could even third-party contract to PDC, and the grant would pay them to do that.
So you just need a motion and a second and a vote, that's it, from the board. Well, fellow board members, you've heard the information disseminated.
Mr. Chairman, I certainly would approve such a move, and would make that motion, but I would like to hear back from, I don't want to get ourselves on a bind and not be able to do what they want us to do, and I don't want us to accept responsibility for more than we think we're accepting. But I would like to see this project move forward, and I would like to get those answers from the Planning District Commission to make sure we're all on the same page, and maybe have this come back in March. And that will give you enough time, correct?
It should, yeah, because she's been working on that portion of it already. I mean, that
So you'd
portion,
like to
so it
table
should.
Yeah, I'd like to wait to make sure we're all on the same page
Okay.
and make sure that they know what we're going to do, we know what they're going to do, or whether the Planning District Commission's going to do, and then that's when I would feel a lot more comfortable with it. But I'm certainly supportive of the idea.
Is it consensus of the board then to table this till March? Okay.
And I think it's not the question of paperwork, the associated paperwork, but with federal, go out and actually interview the people that are performing the work to see if they think that they're getting paid the right wages, and, you know, it involves a little.
Donnie left, that's our whole music, sorry.
Donnie left us. It just involves a little bit more. That's why I said you need other
Yes.
agencies that administer these.
Okay, thank you,
Thank
Mayor.
you all. Thank you all.
Thank you.
That sounds so much more fancy than it is. Well, thank you all for your time, and you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. You too. Now, that was 6B, was it not? 6A, I mean. All right, 6B was school board.
That's the letter, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Do you want me to talk to
Dr. Bennett, would you like to present that letter, and I think Mr. Latchney and
Based on the joint board meeting we had, as well as the high school renovation committee meeting that both have been held in the last couple of weeks, we have presented a letter to you all just asking for approval to move forward with having conversations with Jamerson Lewis, who has presented a unsolicited proposal. It does not mean that we plan to do anything yet, but we do want to look at perhaps phasing that project so that it can be a pay-as-you-go and it will not cost taxpayers more money in terms of taxes, tax increases. I think the consensus is that we want to be able to do something to the high school that is in need of repair and renovation, but we want to be able to do it in a manner that we can afford it. So that's what that letter is asking, just that we're able to go ahead in good faith to have conversations with Jamerson Lewis, who has a concept design.
Thank you very much. Do we need an action item on that?
It would just be a motion authorizing them to have discussions of doesn't authorize spending on their doing and
Motion been duly made, is that second? Further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay. Next is Sheriff. Ms. Allen.
Yes, sir. You received an email today from the sheriff, and he addressed some of the concerns from the weekend of not having a generator in the jail. I think it was jail magistrate's office and the gas pump that they have located at the sheriff's department. And he was requesting the board's consideration to purchase a generator. I reached out to Mr. Wingfield over the weekend, because we've had this conversation several times in the last few days through the chaos of the ice storm this weekend. And he's reaching out to VDM to see if there's grant funding for a generator. I know in the past there has been one, it's like an 80-20 type match. So I'm waiting for him to address that question. And also, we talked about some other alternatives, possibly connecting our office and the jail to the big generator, and maybe get a separate generator from that.
It's not great, there we go. And also an electrician in the courthouse, and they're looking at different options too. So we're working on it. I don't know if it's something that you want to do sooner and just appropriate the money, or let us go through the process. It's totally up to the board.
Yeah, I'm sure the board.
That's the large generator behind the courthouse. Yes, they do. So they had an alternative of having to fill the cars up this weekend.
Okay, it's a consensus of the board that we table this till March.
We'll work with the sheriff and
Yes.
try to figure out, come up with some cost estimates. Does that sound good?
Chairman,
The other problem was the magistrate's office, and I think that's just a separate issue that we're going to have to take care of immediately. And also, I did ask the sheriff if there were some of the services that they could use their MDTs, and he did say that there were some things they could do, but some things they had to go inside.
Sheriff, is anything you'd like to add?
yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I had some phone issues. I don't know if you'd called for me, but I was trying to listen to you. I didn't hear everything Ms. Adams said, but certainly it's an issue that really came to light over the past few days, and we are very underserved with our current generator, and the magistrate's office is completely offline. And without a live magistrate there, we really cannot provide any services to citizens, whether it's an ECO or a bond issue or a warrant someone tries to take out, or even processing an arrestee. So we're completely offline. We're not able to do anything in regards to that.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Hogan.
if I could, Sheriff, this is Bill Hogan.
Yes.
So I have not seen the letter. I haven't seen my email today, but if I understand correctly, there is a generator for the sheriff's office, but just that generator doesn't serve the electrical service in the magistrate's office. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, it is a 40-plus-year-old, a very small propane generator that runs a bank of lights that goes down the hallway of the old jail. None of the sheriff's office side is served by this generator. No outlets on the sheriff's side. So we're completely in the dark. None of the new door locking mechanisms operate. It's literally a few fluorescent lights, which, I'll be glad to show you if you need to see what actually works. And our gas pump was not even working over the past few days. There was issues with that, so we were buying gas retail from places open in town.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Any other comments, questions?
No, sir. I do appreciate the efforts of the county staff in helping us, but we really need a long-term solution in getting some power to the building.
Yes, very understandable. Yes, sir. Thank you, too.
Thank you.
Okay, it's consensus of the board. If you collect the information, get back with us.
Yeah, and in the meantime, we'll work on some type of short-term solution to try to cover some of the other issues.
Okay, thank you. Next is committee appointments or reappointments. First is the Planning Commission. Mrs. Annie Trent and Mr. Earl Dickerson Planning Commission terms expired on December 31st, 2020. Please consider appointments at this time. Mr. Abbott.
I nominate Annie Trent to be reappointed.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Let's see, being this from the Fallen River District. Mr. Hinkle, do you have any?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate Ms. Gina Prue for being the representative from Fallen River.
Ms. Jenny Prue,
I'll second.
duly second. Conversation? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay. Next is Cortland Park Foundation Board, appointing member to the Foundation Board to fill the vacancy of Dr. Paul Harvey. The Cortland Foundation Board of Directors held its regular scheduled monthly meeting on Monday, February the 1st, and voted to recommend Ann Dixon for consideration by the Board of Supervisors for this appointment.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we appoint Ann Dixon to the Portland Park Foundation Board.
Thank you. Is that second?
I'll second that.
Discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay. Next, gentlemen, is the consent agenda, which includes approval of bills, minutes, supplemental appropriations, line item transfers, and fund transfers. Any item on the consent agenda shall be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any board member prior to the vote on the consent agenda. Items removed from the consent agenda shall be considered by the board individually in order to which they were removed from the consent agenda immediately following consideration of the consent agenda. I hope everyone's had an opportunity to review the consent agenda. Any questions, comments, concerns?
Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Motion, duly made, is that second? Discussion. We'll have a roll call vote. Mr. Hinkle. Aye. Mr. Hibbs. Aye. Mr. Abbott. Aye. Mr. Hope.
Aye.
I also vote aye. Mr. Latchney.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, one quick update. Last meeting, I mentioned somebody had left us 1.4 acres in a will. We have since, in doing our work to get the title straight, have discovered we think wife that may own half of this. The lawyer that first filed the will neither confirm nor deny, he's not sure. So we're working on it, just FYI, just want to let everybody know we're working.
Thank you.
It's always the woman.
I love it. Ms. Adams.
Yes.
You can't make this stuff up.
I know, really.
No.
Only us. Only a couple of things. I want to reach out and thank Jeff Shepherd for his diligence throughout the weekend. I think he worked harder probably over the last 3 days. And he had to serve the role of 2 or 3 maintenance guys, so he has been very diligent in working through all the issues this weekend. And also Kerry McLeese with the landfill. All of his guys have been working hard and trying to reach out and help also. So anyway, everybody's pulled together and we've gotten through it. And I guess there's expectations of things tomorrow night, so here we go again.
Thursday night.
Okay, Thursday night. Is it tomorrow?
Start.
And I'd also like to thank Michelle. She reached out to us from the Times-Virginian and asked for us to submit some of our 2020 successes. So I'm anxious to see that article in the paper this week. So, and the third thing is Mr. Carter delivered a letter. It was an invitation to the town mayor on the 5th of February. And that's to meet with the board, have a joint meeting so we can sit down and we can try to ask questions, appropriate questions to discuss and just have that unity again as 2 bodies. And so we're waiting an answer from the council as to what dates would work for them so that we can coordinate a meeting. That's it.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, gentleman, Supervisor Concerns, Mr. Hank.
Well, I guess my concern came up tonight. Why isn't the sheriff's department a priority for getting power restored? Seems to me like that's like emergency service. That'd be like
Yes,
first on the list to get power put back to them.
you're right, I agree.
Through the electrical company?
Yeah.
It took a phone call to finally get it yesterday. Mr. Wingfield talked to Dominion. He scheduled a call.
You know, and Mr. Hinkle's got a wonderful point there. It's just unreal. And as Mr. Abbott said, in regards to these towers with Dominion, so in your conversation with whomever with Dominion, we'd like to have some answers,
Yeah.
if you don't mind.
I think the biggest problem, and I communicated to you over the weekend, was they had to put up some kind of arm.
Yeah.
2 arms broke, cross arms, 2 cross arms broke. And so they had to repair those before they could restore any of the electricity. So that was a major undertaking, I gather.
Mr. Hibbs.
No, just along with what Ms. Adams was saying, I mean, it's always nice to see when the community gets behind its people, and, you know, there's a long history of that here, and, you know, a strong sense of community. It's nice to see the church offering free meals for people without power, and the VFW offering some, I'd say housing, but I mean sleeping quarters, I guess, and I'm sure there's many others, so it's just nice to see the community always coming together, whether it's for everybody else or individuals. That's something that happens often here, and it's a really neat thing to see.
Thank you. Mr. Abbott.
Let me ask Mr. Laxton. I guess first I want to ask you if I'm asking a proper question. There's 2 of us that have to stand for re-election. And it appears that we're not going to get the information on a census that we need. And 70 and 71 has happened, and the General Assembly had to run 3 years in a row, run over other years. So my question is, the fact that we're not gonna get this till September, does this affect our filing deadline? And this is for Shannon and I. And I guess it's a question maybe for the, I don't know, maybe for the Department of Election. Well, we have to run, if we do run, we'll have to run also the next year than you did. So is that a proper question to ask you to look into?
It is. I just downloaded the state redistricting guide, and most of the state's answers is we don't know yet. But it is looking like it's going to require successive elections. But I will do a little bit of research.
And I know in years past, when it did it, the filing deadline was extended rather than the June 10th, 11th, to 12th. Just be curious to know what they're thinking.
Like I said, I just downloaded their redistricting guide from the state. And I've kind of browsed it, but I didn't read it closely, but I'll go through it and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Good point, thank you. Mr. Hogan?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, just a couple things. As far as the meeting with the town council, I think it's a good idea. It's been a lot of faces changed. I think since the last time we met, we got 3 new faces on this board, and I know there's maybe 3 new faces on the town council. So I think it's a good time, if nothing else, to get together and just put a name with a face and know who we're, who's who, and talk about the things that we need to talk to talk about the things we need to talk about to move our community collectively forward. Somebody already touched on the weather that's coming, as if the weather we had wasn't bad enough. And I'm sure Mr. Wingfield and others are looking into, should we need shelters? Are they ready? Because this storm looks like it could be worse than the weekend. And we already still have a lot of folks in the county without power still. So if we need to start opening up a shelter, where would it be? Who's going to man it? Will it have power? I mean, all those kinds of things. And then the last thing is, I know a lot of folks will be cleaning up from this past weekend, and no doubt will be cleaning up from what's coming. But I want to remind our citizens that for those people who don't have a place to take their brush, their limbs and their sticks and their trees, and the county landfill takes it, and we grind it up for mulch. So citizens can take their yard debris there. Correct me if I'm saying something wrong, but I think they may have a size limit on what they can grind. But as far as just regular, all the limbs that I've raked up and pulled out of my yard, that's probably where they're going. But I just want to remind our citizens that that service is available. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. To answer one part of your question, social services, it's their responsibility to man the station, and the station's that community center, it's not. Yeah.
And as a backup, we have the primary school.
That's right.
If we have a mass type of situation.
All right. Saying that, upcoming meetings, we got a meeting Tuesday night, a workshop meeting, and then our normal board meeting is March 9th. Mr. Abbott.
Mr. Carter?
Well,
these 2 gentlemen, did you speak? Did you have anything to say?
Lord have mercy. Hello?
You were looking
Mr. Abbott.
Mr. Chairman, I move we rise.
Thank you, sir.
I move Mr. Abbott turn his headlight on.